Welcome back to another podcast. Today I have David Storm. David is the owner of Guardian Pest and Termite. So David, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, wanted to bring you on and talk about a little bit about your story as well as your company. So we can begin with just kind of like, where did you grow up? Where did you? Where did David came from?
All right. So my dad was in the Navy, so we moved every couple of years for the most part. So we always sort of settled back in Annapolis, Maryland. We always had a house there, and we would bounce around from place to place, base to base, and always kind of ended up there. So it's kind of what I consider home. I still have family. My parents are still in Annapolis, Maryland, and I have brothers in D.C. and Northern Virginia. So that's kind of what I think of as home is back up in that area.
Okay. What was your life like when you were in high school over there?
So it's kind of funny that my dad retired right when I graduated. So his last job was on a base in Virginia, and it was actually a weapon testing facility. So randomly throughout the day, you'd just hear a loud boom and your house would shake. And that was them test firing the big guns that actually go on the ships. So it was definitely interesting. I mean, it was, moving every couple of years. You had to get good at meeting people and making friends and sort of trying to find a way to fit in, if you will. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting, but I think that probably helped now in what I'm doing with having my own business and in terms of getting out there and trying to meet people and network and do things like that. I think that probably helped set me up for that a little bit, honestly.
Would you describe yourself as like more introverted or extroverted?
Probably extroverted, I think.
Okay.
So, I'm one of those where I'd prefer to be out and about, hanging out with people, talking, doing that kind of stuff as opposed to just sitting at home, which is nice now and again, don't get me wrong, but,
Yeah. So like having to move every so often, being extroverted probably helped you a little bit in terms of like making new friends. And
yeah, I think so. And even initially I may not have been as, extroverted, but it just kind of forced you to have to be that way. So. Mm-hmm. And playing sports and things like that help too, because it kind of gets you into those little groups where you're more around people with similar interests, if you will.
Yeah. What sports did you play?
So mostly soccer, lacrosse, and golf growing up. So. Do
you still play golf?
I do. I'm starting to play a little bit more now that my kids are getting a little bit older. I'm able to get out and play a little bit more, so I am starting to play again. So.
What's your handicap?
Oh, still not good. Not as good as it used to be. It's getting better, but it still has. I got some work to do.
Yeah. So I kind of noticed. I looked up your LinkedIn profile, and
mm-hmm.
you were doing some home inspection, and you were kind of in the construction mm-hmm. field for quite a while. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of walk us through how you got into construction and a little bit about each kind of
stage?
Yeah,
so actually when I moved here in 2002 after graduating college, my degree was in recreation facility management, actually. So I moved here and I thought I was going to work maybe with like the Parks and Rec department doing that kind of stuff. And they had a hiring freeze, so they weren't hiring and I was just looking for something to do. So I kind of fell into construction and figured out that I really liked it, and then it just kind of stuck and went from there. Started off as like a superintendent for a home builder, and then sort of bounced around to different positions, estimating, project management, things like that.
And when you went to college, how did you decide on the recreational facility management side?
Truthfully, when I got to college, I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. I just was sort of looking for something that really kind of piqued my interest, and that was something that just seemed really fun, and mostly outdoors. Most of the stuff. I actually did my internship at TPC Sawgrass down in Ponte Vedra, so I was there working with the Park and Rec department within the hotel, within the resort, mm-hmm. Which was cool and it was fun. And then when I graduated, that's when I realized that there wasn't really a whole lot of money to be made in that industry. Not something they really told you much about when you were in school. Yeah. So I found it difficult to find work that was actually going to be, that was going to pay well. And then that's when I kind of started transitioning and looking at other things, and construction just kind of happened and I really liked it.
So you were doing like home inspections in construction. Was that your own company? Like
yeah. So after several years within construction doing the different, project management, estimating, things like that. I had one or two, I would say, bosses that they weren't the best people in the world. And it just got to where I was like, man, I really don't like working for these kinds of people. And that's when I started looking at the prospect of sort of doing my own thing and having my own business and not having, somebody that I was working for. And at that time I was doing commercial construction, but I always loved the residential side. So I went ahead and got licensed to do home inspections, and that just sort of took off on its own. I decided to leave the construction industry per se, and I just got into doing home inspections. So did that for probably 5 or 6 years and transitioned into radon mitigation. Just sort of, I was doing a lot of testing through home inspections and realized that there was a lot of work there, but not a lot of people doing the work. It's a very specific sort of thing to have to find and fix. So transitioned into that, and actually as of this year I'm no longer doing home inspections. So that's something I'm just kind of over and letting go. So been busy enough with the other stuff that I don't need that. So
are you still doing like radon?
So our company, we still do some radon mitigation and stay pretty busy with that. Our big focus is pest control. That's what I really want to grow and really what I want to continue focusing on in the future. But in the last 5 or 6 years, I've made so many contacts doing the radon mitigation. I still just get calls pretty frequently. So it's one of those things that I haven't decided whether I'm going to continue with or let go as well. But certainly the pest control is the direction I'm going.
So you're currently married?
Yes.
So what is life like being an entrepreneur, like business owner, and being married? What's the?
I mean, it's actually really nice. I know sometimes I probably drive my wife nuts with answering calls on weekends and things like that, because if you let stuff go as a business owner, you miss that call, you don't call back, you lose the work. So it gets a little tough in that respect. But she has a pretty demanding job. So with me, I'm a little more flexible since I make my own schedule. So, when one of my kids is sick at school, I can drop what I'm doing and go get them and sort of pick up the slack in that regard. So I think that sort of the good makes up for the bad, I think, in most cases. So,
yeah. Do you find you get support like from your wife, from your family?
Absolutely. Yeah, she 100% supports me, especially, I'm not huge online with social media, and so she'll see posts and Facebook things about pest control and asking for things, and she's always, hey, you got to look at this, hey, you got to look at that, tag me and do it. And so she's great about helping out with that kind of stuff. And when I do need to work on a weekend or something like that, I mean, she's super supportive of all that. So
yeah, I find it's good to have alignment with your wife or your spouse, like in terms of what you're doing. It just makes things a lot easier or better to go.
Yeah, it does, absolutely.
Yeah. So you've been doing kind of radon mitigation and pest control. How did you get into the pest control business?
So actually, I was in a networking group, and I just met a guy who had a pest control franchise, and we just through the networking group became friends and started talking and realized that we both sort of had common interests in the crawl space side of our businesses with moisture control and, in my case, radon control in a crawl space, things like that. So we started working together on some crawl space stuff, and then decided just to kind of join forces and roll pest control and radon mitigation all into one company. And then about, I'd say 2.5 years ago, he decided to do something else. So I ended up buying him out, and it's just me now. So.
So previously it was like under a different name, and now you have a
So
a
when
name.
we started that company, it was actually Segway Environmental was the name of the company, and it's sort of a vague name, and I never really loved it, but it just we felt like it sort of encompassed everything we were doing with the moisture control, the radon, the pest control. It just sort of covered everything. And then last summer, I decided to kind of rebrand with Guardian Pest and Termite. It's just, I never was in love with the old name, and it was a little confusing for a lot of people. They don't know how to say it and spell it, and it got kind of funky at times. So I think we decided to go ahead and rename and hire somebody to do the name and logo, and I think it's made a big difference. So
Nice. What are some misconceptions about the pest control industry?
I think one of the biggest ones is that it's, dangerous to have that kind of stuff around your house. At the end of the day, the EPA is really, really heavily involved, and we're very heavily regulated on what we can and can't use. That's probably the number one question I get with most people is this safe for my kids and pets? Yes. When we mix the chemicals at their application rate to use around a house, it's perfectly safe around kids and pets. I have kids and pets, and I don't use anything in the houses I go to that I wouldn't use in my own house, and it's perfectly safe as long as it's used according to the label. So,
And how has the industry kind of changed in the past 10 years or so?
Well, I can speak more for the last probably 5 or 6, and for us, the biggest thing would be, or I think in my experience, just cost. Especially with COVID, a lot of our costs just went through the roof and never came back down. A lot of the chemicals we use are mixed or put together either here or maybe in Mexico, but most of the main ingredients come from China. And once COVID hit, they jacked the prices up on everything, and they never really came back down. So that's kind of been a struggle, trying to get your pricing to where you're competitive with other people, but also being fair to your customers and not, charging too much, but also still, making a profit, because it is a business at the end of the day. So
Right.
you gotta make money too. So
Yeah. What's a typical day for you, like running your business or?
So generally I'm up and out by no later than 8 o'clock. I'll get my kids off to school for the most part by 7:15, 7:30, and then I'm off to my first spray. And I'll have anywhere, busy season from 15 to 20 services in a day. Wintertime, when it slows down a little with mosquito not being active, anywhere from 10 to 15. So it does slow down a little bit in the wintertime naturally, which is nice. It forces you to kind of catch your breath a little bit during the busy season, which is summertime. Usually like October through September, mosquito season's pretty active, so we get much, much busier during that time. So
What is the biggest challenge you've seen kind of either running the business or just in the pest control industry in general?
Well, for me right now, my biggest challenge is hiring. Part of that is, finding people that are willing to do the work, because, with working with chemicals, I have to wear long sleeves and long pants even in the summer, so it can get a little uncomfortable at times. We do crawl space work often, which is not something a lot of people like to do. And then, even as a technician, you still have to get at least minimally licensed. So it's tough to get somebody who's just kind of looking for something to do to commit to that and actually sit down and take a class and take a test and get a license just for a job they think they may or may not want to do. So I think at my point in my business right now is that entry level hiring is a little bit of a challenge that I'm trying to sort of get over that hurdle. So
Yeah. And what type of pest control services do you offer?
So really everything, general household pests, mosquito, termites, we'll do fleas, yard control, which is like flea, tick, fire ant, things like that. We'll do roaches, and really anything anybody has, we can take care of. So
Are there like any new techniques or things that you've kind of picked up along the years to treat pests?
yeah, so especially on the termite side, in the last probably year, I've started offering like a bait station system for termite treatments as opposed to just a liquid treatment. So I initially didn't know a whole lot about it when I first got into the business, and then in the last probably 2 or 3 years, I've done a little research and figured out that it's actually a pretty effective and pretty good system to use. So that's something I've just sort of recently started offering in the past probably year or so, which I think is a great option for a lot of customers.
Do you educate like customers on the different treatments or like how to prevent pests, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's all kind of part of the process. When I get to a house for the first time, if I see that they have trees overhanging and touching the roof, that's obviously a really good way for pests to get in. If they've got clogged gutters, that gutter overflow creates, moisture on the foundation, all those kinds of things. If you take care of those situations, that'll definitely help minimize the amount of pests that are in and around your house. So I always try to look for that kind of stuff, when I'm out at a house initially, which can help make my job a little easier too. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we recently experienced some of that, like clogged gutters or like overflowing water and all that. And
yeah, it definitely helps because especially like roaches, they'll eat decaying leaves. So like if you have wet leaves sitting in a gutter, they'll sit there and eat that, and then as soon as it gets super hot like it has been, like anything, they want to get where it's shaded and cool, so they try to come into your house. So for most people, they see like an occasional roach and they think, oh my god, I have roaches, but it's just they're not there because you have a dirty house. They're there because they're just getting away from predators and getting away from the heat. So pretty typical.
Yeah. How do you ensure like customer satisfaction?
We generally just offer essentially callback service. So if you're on a quarterly or even a bi-monthly plan, we're out every either 2 or 3 months. If you're having issues or continual issues in that time, we just come out and retreat, respray, maybe target specific areas. But yeah, it's really just essentially like a service warranty is what we do. And, we'll be out there as many times as we need to get it fixed and get it right. So
what are some like memorable success stories that you have?
Well, one of them actually more recently was it was a flea situation at a house in TGK, and the customers didn't have any pets or anything. It was, I don't know if you're familiar or not, but they have a really bad deer problem in TGK. Way too many deer, and they're not allowed to get rid of them. So they actually had deer that were bedding down in their yard, and that was what was getting fleas in their yard, and then the fleas were getting in their house. They had a couple other companies out and couldn't really figure out what was going on, and it took several tries and several different sort of outside the box type treatments, but we were able to get rid of them, and to my knowledge they've not come back. So that was a little bit of a challenging one. That was not something I'd dealt with before. Typically with fleas, it's very simple. They have a dog, the dog has fleas, or a cat. You clean the dog, you treat the house, and it's done. With this one, it was different because they had no pets, but they couldn't control the deer either. They just kept coming back in the yard, so the fleas kept coming back. So it was pretty interesting.
So what was the solution? Just getting rid of the deer?
Well, we ended up, they ended up putting up some sort of like wire fencing to keep the deer out of the yard, and then we had to treat the yard with granules. I treated it with liquid, and then I actually had to bomb the crawl space too, because they were in the crawl space, and then they were getting in through some openings in the floor in the crawl space as well. So it was a little tricky. It was sort of a multi-step process, but we figured it out. So
like over the different seasons, how did the past challenges change through the seasons, like summer versus winter or in between?
Yeah, so in the summer they're going to be a little bit more active. Insects in general, with heat and humidity and warm weather, they're gonna reproduce a lot faster, and they tend to live a little bit longer. So it's always a little bit busier, a little bit more activity in the summertime. Wintertime, it will slow down. You're still going to see stuff, and it's never a good idea to just stop treatments if you're on a program in the wintertime, because you see a few less bugs around the house, because they're still there. They're just reproducing a little bit more slowly. And then if you skip those treatments and let those chemicals kind of go away, then in the spring when it warms back up, they're going to be a lot more active, and you're going to have a lot more issues, and you'll kind of be starting from scratch at that point. So, and then with mosquitoes also, they tend to die down a good bit in the winter months. It's a little too cold for them. So usually October, November through February into March is pretty slow for mosquitoes. So.
What are some red flags that might indicate a serious pest issue?
For me, a lot of times it's just debris around the house. If you got, stacked wood right up against the house, that's going to be a great place for bugs to want to hang out. Flower pots that are overflowing with water and things like that. Those are going to be great spots for, any bug to have a nice water source to survive on. And then mosquitoes, I think they say mosquitoes only need a bottle cap full of water to lay eggs in. So they don't need much room. They don't need much space. So if you give them anything, they'll take advantage of it. So I would say in most cases, if I walk up to a house and I see just a ton of plantings that are full of water and things like that, that's always something where I'm trying to educate the customer, like, hey, you may want to, dump this out from time to time and make it a little harder for the bugs.
Yeah.
So,
what is kind of the most rewarding thing about being in the pest industry or pest control industry?
Yeah. Well, big part of it is just working for myself. I just love that I don't have, somebody tell me where I need to be and where I need to go. Besides, of course, the customers and my schedule, but and also I just like, solving some of those problems. It's almost like I feel like it's almost like you're battling Mother Nature in a way. It's like these bugs have been around a lot longer than us, and now we're moving into their space and we're trying to figure out how to get rid of them. I find that kind of an interesting thing to try to figure out how to, keep them away as much as possible. It's just sort of a good little, I don't know, it's maybe kind of weird, but it's a fun little back and forth that I like. So
yeah. What career advice would you give somebody who's basically in high school or about to graduate and go into either college, military, or some kind of trade or work? Like, what advice would you give them?
As far as pest industry in general, or just
well, in general, like career in general, like how should they decide on what to do?
Just try to focus on something that you think you'd enjoy doing, I think, is the big thing. Trades, I think, right now are huge. I can tell you when we do crawl space work, we need dehumidifiers and things like that. We'll need power outlets, and I've just recently found a great electrician, but prior to him, it's tough to find a good electrician. You either have really big, huge companies that are crazy expensive and they don't have time to go out and give you one outlet for a dehu, or you have these guys that know electrical but they're not licensed, and you're kind of like not really wanting that person to go into someone else's house and do work. So I feel like a lot of the trades that plumbing, electrical, something like that, even if you're small, you can do really well and get a lot of work and make a lot of money even without working for a bigger company, just doing your own thing. So I think that would definitely be a good route. I mean, as far as college, I mean, it's not necessarily for everybody. I went and I loved it and I wouldn't change it, but at the same time, I have a degree in something and I'm not even doing anything remotely close to using it.
So what did you like about college, since kind of looking back?
Yeah.
You're not using the degree, but...
Well, a lot of it is just relationships. Like I still talk to people from college. I have a few business, dealings with people actually from school still. And then just, I think with me, the big thing was it helped with time management, like getting to classes on time. I was playing club lacrosse, so it's like you got practice, you got games, you've got classes, you've got everything that you're doing, and you still want some of that social time. So for me, it was about kind of balancing all that and learning time management. That's probably one of the biggest things I got out of college, which actually, that helps you in your work life as well. So,
yeah. How do you navigate challenges in your life and career or in business?
So for me, I try, I feel like it's important to kind of have that separation. So I try not to let the work stuff take over the family time and the family time take over the work stuff. You got to kind of have it separated as evenly as you can. I just started recently using a company that does, they use AI, and it's sort of like an answering service, and it does a whole bunch of different stuff. And that's great because now I can kind of put my work phone aside on the weekend, and if I miss a call, an AI bot picks it up and they'll start communicating with them as far as what they want, and I can either choose to jump in or not jump in. And I think that's really, really going to help me. It's pretty new for me right now, but I think that's definitely going to help in the future as far as having that work-life balance, and being able to separate the two and still be successful with both.
Do you feel that you've found kind of like your passion in life, or do you think there's no such thing as as passion in life as far as work or something like that?
Well, I was about to say, as far as work goes, this is the happiest I've been, and this is the job I like the most out of everything I've done. if I could not work at all, I would prefer to not work at all, but I think everybody would say that. So yeah, I mean, I really like what I'm doing. I like the challenge of it. I like, being my own boss, and I think there's a good future forward in it for sure. But yeah, of course, if I didn't have to do anything, I probably could give you an actual handicap for my golf game if I didn't have to work. But it is what it is. You got to do something.
Yeah. What have you learned kind of throughout your life about managing finances or managing your money?
So that's something that even as a business owner, I'm still sort of, I lean on my accountant a lot for that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously I know what's a dumb purchase and what's a smart purchase and things like that. But truthfully, on a personal side, my wife sort of handles most of our finances. I have a little number dyslexia issue that I deal with sometimes. So once we kind of figured that out, she was like, I don't think you're allowed to touch our checkbook anymore because it's driving me insane. So truthfully, on a personal side, she handles all that, and I'm very grateful for that because I know it's a pain in the butt to do that. But on the business side, yeah, I mean, I handle that, and of course I lean on, tools, QuickBooks, Excel spreadsheets for pricing jobs, because again, I flip numbers frequently, so if I have a calculator and I have some way to do that math for me, that certainly helps. So
What are some lessons you've learned about finances?
Oh, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know if it's so much lessons learned as just learning to be, I guess initially when I first started on my own in business, I wasn't too focused on it. I was just kind of like, let's go out and do the job and the money will be there and we'll just do our thing. But now, I'm getting ready to hopefully potentially hire someone soon, and I got to start looking at getting another truck and insurance and all that kind of stuff. Now I have to think a little harder about that kind of stuff and projecting money coming in, money going out, and figuring out when it makes sense. Because I'm kind of at a point where it's too much for me to handle myself, but I'm not quite at that point where I can take on all that extra expense yet. So that's something that I'm kind of struggling with right now, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. And as far as building like meaningful relationships, what are some things that you do to create or build meaningful relationships?
I mean, right now, I feel like networking is a big part of it. I'm a member of CRG, which I think you used to be as well, and just getting out there and meeting other business owners and other people that are in a similar situation, even if they have different businesses, I think that helps. You can always, talk to people, bounce ideas off of people, and in that group in particular, there are a couple of people in there that have given some really, really good advice on things moving forward, because some of them are customers and they're also fellow business owners, and so they can kind of look at it from, well, I understand what you're saying, but also as a customer, this is what I would like to see. And so it's kind of nice because you can get a little bit of help in both directions in that aspect. So
yeah. How do you stay motivated or focused like on your goals and what you're trying to achieve?
I don't know. I guess family is a big part of that. Like I said, if I didn't have to work, I wouldn't. It's like when you have kids and, they're going to be going to college in a few years, and, it's like, I like my house, I like my car. It's like, you gotta work. I guess that's the motivation right there. I mean, I like what I do, so it's easy to get up and say, all right, I got to go to work today. Very rarely, since I've started doing this, do I get up and say, man, I really don't want to work today. Like it's something that I enjoy doing, so, I don't mind getting up and doing it. And it's not super difficult to motivate, but on those days when I need it, I think family is a big motivator for me, just knowing that I'm doing it for somebody other than myself. So
yeah. How do you deal with like stress, like everyday stress or kind of work stress?
I mean, I'd say again, family time, just getting home and hanging out and, watching TV with my wife or doing stuff with the kids. We love to go to Carowinds and take the kids and do that kind of stuff. So, just having that personal time to sort of unwind is a big one. Like I said, I've started playing a little bit more golf with some friends in the neighborhood. And so that's a good stress reliever as well. So just finding a little bit of time to do that sort of stuff that you enjoy, on the weekends, and that's definitely a good way to help unwind and relieve some of that stress for sure.
Yeah. As far as life lessons, which life lessons had the most impact on you?
Oh, geez. You mean like through the business or just
Could be whatever you want to share.
okay?
Personal, business, either way.
Life lessons. Gosh, that's a good question. I don't know. You might have stumped me with that one.
What are some challenges that you overcame in the past?
Let's see. I'd say one of them, at least, with the business here in the last few years, was I think initially I was in business for myself, and then I merged, had a business partner for a while, and I guess I didn't really know how that was going to play out. And in hindsight, I don't know if I would do that again. Having a business partner could get very difficult. His wife is also heavily involved in the business, even though she wasn't a partner on paper. It felt like there was a lot of, it felt like there was more than just two partners in the business, and it got a little tricky at times trying to navigate, how all that works. And I didn't really know what to expect walking into that. Not to say that it was awful or that it was a bad experience, because I learned a lot from it, but I don't know if I would do that again. As far as having just like an equal 50-50 partner, I think that was a little bit tricky. That was probably one big thing I took away from, or have taken away from my business life, is that's something that I don't know that I would do again.
What were your expectations kind of going into the partnership, and versus what you kind of picked out afterwards?
So I guess one of my expectations was, initially when we formed our partnership, I was under the impression that we were all sort of headed in the same direction. And then little by little it became obvious that I had more of a desire to grow and expand the business and get things bigger, whereas they wanted to stay a little smaller, more mom and pop family business, and they were completely content with the way things were, whereas I was looking to get things to grow and go in a different direction. And initially when we formed the partnership, that's kind of where I thought we were all headed. And then when I found out that it became obvious that that wasn't the case, it made things a little tricky, because then we started butting heads, and we got along great, and we're I don't have any hard feelings towards any of them. It's just we started butting heads a lot on little things that I didn't think would be an issue, and that's where it started to get a little tricky.
Did you have a lot of like upfront conversations of like what you want the company to look like? And
yeah, we did actually, and that's why I was a little surprised, because initially I thought we were all in the same boat on everything, and then it kind of took me by surprise when I sort of started to realize that wasn't what they wanted. I wasn't sure what was lost in translation or what was missed, because I was under the impression that we were all headed in the same direction, and it just didn't turn out that way. So it was a little surprising, but
yeah. What would you say, like, what would be your advice for somebody who's trying to partner up with somebody else on a business venture?
I would say exactly that. Just have a lot of those really good conversations before you actually make the decision, and make absolutely sure everybody actually is on the same page and wanting to go in the same direction. Because it wasn't all bad, don't get me wrong. I mean, like now, if I go on vacation and things pop up, I'm the one dealing with it. I'm the one, it's just me. It was nice, having a partner and having other people that step in, when you weren't around, or if you were sick or whatever, you felt like you weren't out of the game. You felt like you weren't missing work or losing work, because you had somebody else there to pick up the slack. So that part was great. That part I wouldn't, trade for anything. But at the same time, you just really got to make sure you're going in the same direction and wanting the same end result. And those are the super important conversations you definitely have to have ahead of time.
Yeah. When it comes to kind of continuous education, do you do anything unique as far as like staying up to date with information, whether it's for pest control or whether it's just kind of life in general?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as pest control goes, we're obviously required to do continuing ed every year. So, there's lots of different classes you can take. I personally prefer the in person classes. I feel like I get more out of that than just sitting at a computer. But sometimes time, being a solo owner operator right now, sometimes time isn't in my favor for, taking a day or two to go to a conference or something to get those hours. Sometimes it's easier just to do it online. So continuing ed is a big one, and we're licensed in North and South Carolina, so I've got to do it for both states. So it ends up becoming a lot, but you got to do it. I mean, it's just something that you have to do, and I learn a lot from it every time I start one of those classes. I'm like, all right, here we go, and then by the end, I'm like, oh wow, I didn't know that. There's so much that you don't know. It's always good to stay on top of that stuff. So
Yeah. How do you stay curious as far as like new knowledge, new information?
So for me, like I'm not like a huge tech person in terms of like I'm really good at technology, but I love technology. Like I love anything that's going to help me make my job, either easier or more efficient or make more money. Like I said, I just started working with a guy doing, AI type stuff for, phone calls and sales and things like that. And I think it's awesome, and I think it's going to help me a lot in the future, but I know little to nothing about it. I'm relying on them for all of that. But it's just one of those things where you gotta, I feel like that's the direction everything's going. So, I had the opportunity to work with somebody on that and get started on it. And, I think it's going to work out well. So,
Yeah. What do you find fulfilling, or what's the key ingredient in having a fulfilling life?
Well, I mean, I think right now, like I kind of talked about before, as a business owner, is having that work-life balance. You got to be able to put the time that you need into your business, but you also need that time, with your family and your friends, and that downtime, that personal time to recuperate and rejuvenate and be ready to go. And I think that's huge. You got to have a good balance of both, and that's hard to find now with cell phones and email and constant contact. It's hard for people to disassociate. And personally, I feel like I'm pretty good at that. My wife kind of jokes sometimes, like I'm a home inspector, but I'd come home and I would see things all the time and just completely overlook them. And I'm like, why turn it off? Like I can turn it off. I don't have to see it, like, so I'm pretty good at that disassociation, I guess you could say. So, for me, for me, the answer to that would just be that work-life balance. You got to be able to do both and have time for both.
Mm. What advice would you give to your younger self, like to yourself when you were younger?
Start doing this about 15 years earlier instead of wasting time. Well, not wasting time, but instead of bouncing around, all these different, construction jobs that I liked but didn't love. And it was just like, now that I've sort of fallen into this, I really, really do enjoy it. I kind of wish I'd started doing this, maybe at 25 or 30 instead of where I am now. Would have probably been far more beneficial for me, but I'm glad I'm here now, so I'm just moving forward with it. So,
yeah. As far as your company, anything else you want to share about your company or services that you offer?
I mean, I'd say the biggest thing, like I said, technology, you kind of want to try and stay on top of things. And I know, like right now with mosquitoes, we're using a newer product that it's been out for 4 or 5 years, and not a lot of companies are using it. It's actually a bait station system for mosquitoes. So it targets mosquitoes specifically, so you don't have to just blanket fog bushes with chemical and kill birds and bees and everything else. It's geared specifically to mosquitoes. Mm-hmm. And it tends to work really well in my experience. I still have a few houses here and there where it gets a little tricky and you have to do some additional stuff, but it really works really well. It's just not real well known. A lot of companies aren't really fully invested in using it yet. We've kind of gone all in on it in a lot of cases, and I think it works really well. So it's called Into Care, and we've got information on the website and stuff about it. But I think it's a great system, and it's kind of a newer technology, if you will, within the pest industry, and I think it's pretty awesome. So I think that'd be the big thing. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot of variation in pest control. We all the pest control companies for the most part use mostly the same chemicals and the process is mostly the same. You know, the labels on the chemicals only allow you to do certain things and certain treatments with the chemical. So there's only so much you can really do different, you know, from person to person. So
How can people find you or find your company?
Online, you know, website, Facebook, Instagram.
What's the
any
name
of that stuff.
of the website?
It's guardianpestsc.com
Okay.
is the website. So there was another Guardian Pest somewhere on the West Coast or something, I think. So I had to add the SC for South Carolina. But yeah, guardianpestsc.com. So.
And you do you only service kind of South Carolina area, or do you go
no, we do North and South Carolina. So we've got customers in both states. I try to stick to, you know, South Charlotte. We've got quite a few in the Matthews Monroe area. That's about as far east as I'd like to go. I try to keep it more towards, you know, the Ballantine and then down to south, you know, Indian Land, Rock Hill, Lancaster. We'll go out to Lake Wiley, Clover. We have a bunch of customers out in that area. So I do have a few scattered in, you know, near downtown and north side of town, but I'm trying to sort of stay away from that area. Just too much driving with the traffic. It's just it drives me nuts. So
yeah. And one last question.
Sure.
What does the world need more of today?
What does the world need more of? Sense. People get, I don't know. It's just like everything just seems a little crazy right now. I think everybody just needs to take a breath and calm down and, you know, realize everything's going to be all right.
Yeah, definitely. Well, David, yeah, thank you for sharing a little bit about your company and
thank you.
what you do. And yeah,
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah.